Good morning, Karleen. I love your new glasses. I'm going to give another announcement or two before we jump in, so I'm going to let our online Sangha return back. Looks like we're all hopping back on. Just a friendly reminder to mute yourself unless you'll be sharing. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're kind of quieting down in the Buddha Hall. I think you can all see me in the shadows over here. One more announcement. We asked, it was asked during our sort of feedback moment there. We do have an upcoming Indra's Net. That is happening July 12th. It is a hybrid offering, so online and in person. It is a wonderful way to share with Sangha, get to know one another, share your talents. You can reserve a spot up to 10 minutes where you can showcase anything you would like, poetry, storytelling, dance, any art, you name it. If you would like to reserve your spot, please reach out to June Roshi with any questions to do that. And yes, did I not say that? It is an open mic. That's what that was. Indra's Net open mic. So we need a lot of people to come and participate, come and just watch the show. That'd be great to have a lovely audience full of our favorite Sangha members. So please come join us. Also, all of this wonderful programming that I've been talking about all morning is made possible by all of us together. So please, as you're joyfully able, consider making a contribution either of time or financial means. We have a Dharma box here by the door, and we will put a link in the chat for you to donate as you're able. Okay, without further ado, the woman who may need no introduction, but will get one from me anyways. Let's welcome Karleen Manchanda for this morning's Dharma talk. Woo. A certified mindfulness and meditation instructor here at our center, a board member and co-steward of the Parenting Circle. Just a wonderful presence to our Sangha. Today's talk will be entitled, Live in Joy, Even Among the Troubled. Thank you, Karleen. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I'm just going to check that everybody can hear me okay. So online and in the hall, great. And I'm just going to make a request, if it's not already going to be done, if can the hall be muted just while I'm talking, just so that I know it as an online person, sometimes if noises come from the hall, the screen flips back and forth. So greatly appreciate it. Yes, and just taking a moment just to appreciate the names and faces that I can see. Thank you so much for joining me for the talk this morning. And oh, that's great. I can see everyone now. And before I get started, I just also wanted to mention that I am working from an iPad, and I will be using it for my notes. And when that happens, my Zoom screen gets really tiny in the corner. So if there is any problem with sound or something that someone wants to ask or what have you, I'm going to ask you to just unmute and say something, because otherwise I won't be able to see what's happening. So for those of you that I haven't yet met, as Kelly said, my name is Karleen Manchanda, and one update to the bio is that I'm a past board member, not current. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a Zen student with June Roshi, and a mindfulness teacher at ZLMC. And currently I'm working with my friend and Sangha sister, Kathy Bell, as Kelly mentioned, to facilitate the parent and family programs that includes Mindfulness for Imperfect Parent course that's going to be held in October in case anyone is interested. And I have been fortunate to live in a few different places. I was born in Hawaii and then moved when I was about 12 to the Illinois area, lived there for many years before my husband and I moved to Canada. And also thrown in there for a few months, I lived in India when we went to adopt our first child for just a few months, but it was still with my in-laws and another place of home for me. And as I mentioned, I now reside in Canada as a first generation settler of Japanese ancestry. And I'm really grateful to be speaking to you from my home in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is located on Treaty 1 territory. And Treaty 1 is the unceded lands of the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Inninewuk, the Anishinaabe, the Oyate, the Dakota Oyate peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. And I'm also grateful to gather on Zoom with you in Oak Park, Illinois, which to my understanding is situated on the ancestral lands of the Bodewa-Miakiwen, the Mia, the Oseti-Sakoan, the Ki-Kapui, and the Peoria peoples. May remembering the spirit of gratitude and the intention of shared responsibility for these lands benefit all our relationships. And as Kelly said, just going to bring up my notes here. The title of my talk is Live in Joy, Even Among the Troubled. And I'm going to begin with just a little bit of background of how I arrived at this quote and how it has kind of informed my practice. And my role at ZLMC is not that of an empowered Dharma teacher. So my approach to these talks is really about sharing my experience of how I try to live with the Dharma in my everyday life. And with the hope that, it may spark some curiosity for you and maybe even some openings for your own practice. And for me personally, practicing joy requires effort. And it sounds a little bit sad that I have to effort at joy, but I think I'm just have always tended to be, even as a child, much more comfortable in the realm of worry and things like that. And so sometimes noticing and really truly appreciating joy has been a real challenge. And this practice of learning how is it that I can live in joy even among the troubled, and by troubled, I take that to mean myself sometimes, sometimes the people I love, certainly the world that we live in, the environment. There are all kinds of aspects of trouble that we seem to be immersed in at this point in time. And so the idea of living in joy with all of that, when I first heard this quote, was a little startling. It didn't quite make sense. But I arrived at it through difficulty, through a period where I attended actually a week-long retreat online from here in Winnipeg with the center in December, I believe it was, and had rented a place so that I could actually, try to do it silently and to the best of my ability, doing the things that needed to be done on the schedule, and all seemed to be going well. And then on the morning of the very last day of the retreat, I experienced what I realized was a kind of a panic attack, a kind of anxiety that kind of overwhelmed me. And it was out of proportion to what was actually happening. It was unexpected, not something that I had experienced before. And I should note that, I immediately reached out to the Roshis and to Myogetsu, and they were all wonderful and supportive. It's also true that those waves of panic continued to come after the retreat, and I ended up working with that with the help of a practitioner here in Winnipeg, and support from some Sangha members and the Roshis, and but it lasted for a few months of coming and going, not always every day, but it was something that really led me to, it kind of shook my experience of sitting, because it would often, these panic attacks would arise when I would try to sit and meditate. And so it just led to all kinds of discomfort, insecurity, just uncertainty, and even questioning is, can I be a Zen practitioner if I can't actually sit for extended periods of time? All kinds of extrapolations of the mind and into the future. But eventually, sort of learning how to just work with whatever was coming up in the present. And as I was dealing with this aspect, also in my family, there arose a situation that involved sort of rupture and discord, and it was very stressful. So I had these two things kind of happening simultaneously, and one day, one of the things I could do, I couldn't always sit quietly just on my own for long periods of time, but one of the ways I tried to still engage with my practice was to read teachings from different teachers, and sort of reflect on that. And one of the books that I was reading had this quote, "Live in joy, even among the troubled." And it just deeply resonated at that moment. And it still does, even about 6 months later from the beginning of all of that. Because it gave me, I think, this feeling, I think a little bit of hope, that even though I was feeling all of these difficult things, which intellectually I knew were impermanent, wouldn't last forever, would change, in the moment felt quite overwhelming and quite all-consuming, that this idea that I could still live in joy with all of this was extremely appealing and interesting. And so I decided to look it up. I thought, well, this is an amazing quote. Let me see who said this. And guess who said it? The Buddha. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And that really sort of started me on a very, everyday kind of exploration of joy as a practice, as part of my Dharma practice. And I would like to read to you the full quote, because I feel like it's just so appropriate for the times we're living in. It comes from the Dhammapada, which I believe is often used a lot in the Theravadan tradition, and the translation is by Thomas Byron. And so the teaching verse goes like this: "Live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy and peace, even among the troubled. Look within, be still, free from fear and attachment. Know the sweet joy of the way. And it felt so true and so beautiful, even though I didn't fully understand, how to sort of enact it or embody it in my own life at the time when I first read that phrase, that teaching. And so some of the questions, though, that it helped me to ask myself were, first of all, in the spirit of Thich Nhat Hanh, which seeds inside of me am I watering? So is it the seed of fear? Is it the seed of resentment? Is it the seed of, anger? Or is it the seed of joy, of love, of peace? Which seed am I really watering? And, the sort of along with that, then is there a different choice that I could make? Not in a way that's avoidant of the difficulty. I want to make that really clear. Like, living in joy doesn't mean that we tell ourselves that everything is rose-colored glasses and we just kind of disconnect from what is really hard and what is difficult, but to acknowledge that all of these things coexist at all times. It's often where we're placing our attention that determines what takes up the most space in our mind and sometimes in our heart, right? And then the other question was, how do my choices affect my balance, my equanimity, my ability to act from a clear understanding, from compassion? So if I water this seed, how does that affect the choice, the action that I take? How does it affect my presence, And I realized through sort of, investigating that I had an underlying belief that I could question. And that underlying belief was that suffering is more important than joy. It's more serious work than joy. We have to attend to our suffering, and that is the priority. And I think it can be easy to fall into that kind of thinking, just because of, the Four Noble Truths, for example, the suffering, the suffering is here. These are the causes. This is how we can cease from suffering. There seems to be sometimes a lot of emphasis on what do we do with our suffering. And this wonderful one of what I consider sort of the new generation of North American Buddhist teachers, Don Mauricio, she said in a little video that I saw from her that suffering brings us to our practice, but joy is what keeps us on the path. And I think that for me, that definitely has proven now to be true, that it's suffering, my own suffering brought me to Buddhism, to mindfulness, to meditation. How can this help? But if I only focus on the suffering, it's not balanced, and it's not the whole picture. And so being able to recognize the joy is really critical, because that is something that is much more invitational and inspiring, whether it's subtle or whether it's giddy. It's something that can really motivate us to keep on the path. And so I've realized that the capacity to cultivate joy is as important, and in fact interconnected with our capacity to turn towards pain, right? Towards suffering, towards sorrow. Joy and suffering are not, in fact, opposites, but as I mentioned, they coexist. And if we can see and experience clearly like this, then we recognize that the difficulties actually don't arise or exist independently. It's not all there is. Kindness, generosity, patience, understanding, care, all of those things can arise as a result of difficulty, right? And the joy arises when we can actually acknowledge this, that these things can happen together. A wonderful person to consult through text or podcasts or whatever is Ross Gay, who describes himself as a poet and essayist. And he's most known, I think, for the Book of Delights, in which he undertook for a year to every day write about something that delighted him. And then eventually that turned into a book. He also has a book called Inciting Joy. And I love the word incite for joy, because we always think of inciting as, things that are negative, evil and violence, but inciting joy. And he really wanted to look at what incites joy and what does joy incite. And so his description of the relationship between pain and joy is quite beautiful. So I'll share a quote here. He says, "We often think of joy as meaning without pain or without sorrow, which suggests that someone might be able to live without, or maybe a more accurate phrase is free of, heartbreak or sorrow." And of course, as Zen practitioners, we know that that's not the case. But he says, what happens if joy is not separate from pain? What if joy and pain are fundamentally tangled up with one another? What if joy is not only entangled with pain or suffering or sorrow, but is also what emerges from how we care for each other through those things? What if joy, instead of refuge or relief from heartbreak, is what effloresces from us as we help each other carry our heartbreaks? Such beautiful use of language. Effloresces from us when we help each other carry our heartbreaks. So we're not talking about, again, an ignoring or a getting rid of the difficulties, but it's our response to them, right? And here in Manitoba, a very prime example is the response that our city has had to the wildfire evacuees of the communities that are around, and some quite far north and some closer in. But apparently, I had heard that, our province has had, up to this point, the largest evacuation effort for wildfires in the history of Canada this year. And so many people from these outlying communities have had to come into Winnipeg to stay while the wildfires have been raging. Some have been allowed to go back at this point, thankfully. But the response, the joy, you think, what kind of joy could possibly come out of that danger and the disruption and just the stress of all of that? The joy comes from seeing the way that that people are responding to help carry that devastation, that heartbreak, showing up with not just donations of money, but of materials, of food, of opening shelters for not just the human relatives, but the animal relatives as well, because many people are staying in hotels where pets aren't allowed. Stories of a gentleman in one community who, for some reason, maybe his location was such that he could stay, and he took in as many pets as he could from his neighbors and just has been caring for them for like over a month. you know? So this kind of noticing that in the midst of all of this terrible situation, there is also joy in knowing that the human capacity for goodness and for care is in action, you know? And so I feel like when we're open and attentive, we're more likely to notice the presence of joy, even when there's trouble. So something, you know, to consider in thinking about joy and how it might apply in your own life. I think practicing joy as awakening, as opposed to an accomplishment, right? Sometimes it feels like, oh, I want to sit because then I will feel peaceful and joyful. So it's kind of something that you get after the practice, right? As like the prize of the practice. But really, I've come to try to train myself to think more of the fact that the practice itself can be joyful, regardless of what things are happening. James Baraz, who I believe is the author and teacher of a book and teacher of a course called Awakening Joy, wrote a tricycle article, and he said, you know, joy is not something we have to manufacture. It is already in us when we come into the world, as we can see in the natural delight and exuberance of a healthy baby. We need only release the layers of contraction and fear that keep it from us. So joy is not really something we need to acquire, because it's an innate part of our basic nature and goodness. And, you know, some of us are familiar with sympathetic joy. And in the Buddhist texts, apparently the Buddha describes different kinds of joy, different qualities of joy, different methods of cultivating joy. And one of the more familiar kinds of joy is from the Four Immeasurables, which is sympathetic joy. And along with loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity, I like how Roshi Joan describes them as inherent qualities of mind and heart that connect us to one another. And she says that sympathetic joy is joy in the basic goodness of all beings and joy in the fundamental well-being of ourselves and others. So it's not just being happy for someone else, that's part of it, but it's really, you know, joy in the fact that everyone has that basic goodness and everyone is deserving of well-being, you know. And so rather than striving for joy as sort of an outcome of our practice, these are some of the questions that you might, you know, consider. Can we allow our practice itself to be joyful? Can we trust in the goodness and joy that is inherent in ourselves and others? Can we really trust it? You know, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to fully feel joy because I think there's a part of us that fears not having it anymore. What happens when it goes away? Or, well, if I, you know, or maybe, well, it's not right. There's so many bad things. I feel guilty for feeling that way. When really it's just an inherent part of us, you know, so why not tap into that? Can we find joy in opening to the truth that our life, just as it is, including the difficulty and unpleasantness, is exactly what we need on our path of awakening? Sometimes that's a tough pill to swallow. You know, what do you mean this horrible situation that I'm experiencing is exactly what I need? How can you say somebody who's going through war or something horrible, how can you say that that's exactly what they need? And I think it's not meant to be, you know, a flippant remark or a like, let's look at the bright side of everything kind of thing. And this idea that of a joyful mind being, so important even shows up in the Lojong teachings, and Pema Chodron, in her book, Start Where You Are, maybe to try to explain what you mean by the, you can be joyful because this is what you need. She says these two slogans, one being always maintain only a joyful mind, and the second one being if you can practice even when distracted, you are well trained. These two slogans go hand in hand. The first is saying that if you regard everything that arises as fuel to wake up, you can remain cheerful. The second is saying that you are well trained if you can do that. If you can use everything in your life to wake yourself up rather than put yourself to sleep, no matter what. And the no matter what part, that's tough to, to really accept. So upheaval, things of distress, really, if we kind of remove the extreme reactions that we may have to whatever that upheaval is, at the bottom line, it's change, right? It's change. And when it's change, that means that there's a potential for transformation. And so I've been trying to ask myself, like, can I let go of my preferences, my judgments, my assumptions enough to bear witness to life unfolding rather than bear the weight of my fear and my attachments, right? Can I let those things go enough to just have that opening to know that there's a possibility that this could be potential for something that is useful. And someone that I admire greatly is Father Greg Boyle, who, if you're not familiar with him, he's a Jesuit priest who's worked for the past, is it 30, 40 years in LA. He became, head of the parish there when they had eight rival gangs in that area. And he has managed to develop just a place where anyone is welcome to find work and to find acceptance, to be seen, and for their unshakable goodness is what he calls it. He says it's not even basic goodness, it's unshakable goodness. Everyone has unshakable goodness. And when we can see that, then they become that, and he has started businesses with the help of his supporters that employ ex-gang members, rival gang members, ex-convicts, and people just from every walk of life who need a chance. They're given a chance and they're given supports, and has just made an amazing contribution to the communities there. And so he talks about, right now in LA where he lives and works, there being so much fear that he has people afraid to show up to work because of some of the things that are happening. And so we don't really know always what, under these circumstances, what to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so my wondering is, he says, all we can do is really the next loving thing. And so my wondering was, well, can maintaining a joyful mind and heart help us to learn how to respond with the next loving thing? And to remember, he says, that we do this together, right? We do this together. And so this idea of, the Bodhisattva vow and wanting to save and help, all beings, in sense, it's a responsibility, not a drudgery responsibility, but it's kind of like this saying from Rabindranath Tagore, who was a Bengali poet and writer. He says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was duty. I acted, and behold, duty was joy." And so that is one of those sort of aspirational things. It's not that every day I'm going to be able necessarily to wake up and say, hey, my duties today, I joy, joy, joy all the way. You know, there are days when it doesn't feel so much like that. However, if I can remember some of these things, it helps to shift. It helps to shift, right? And point me in the direction of being able to, even the possibility that duty can also be joy. And, you know, I think maybe because it's summertime, I really felt like, again, it feels a little strange sometimes to say, in the midst of all of the kinds of difficulty and suffering that we're witnessing right now, you know, that we should focus on joy. But I really thought about gardening, about tending a garden, right? And if we only focus on tending the weeds, and we're kind of fixated on, you know, got to get rid of these weeds, got to get rid of them, and we forget to water the flowers, will the flower ever blossom? Right? It can't. So if we want joy to blossom in our life, if we want to be able to offer joy to others as part of our service to them, then we absolutely must water the seeds of joy. It's not just to work on our suffering, you know, are we okay with finding joy amidst trouble, hatred, sickness, and other kinds of suffering? How comfortable am I with that? Or do I feel guilty? Or do I feel like I'm wasting my time? These are, you know, interesting sort of inquiries to make of ourselves. How okay am I with feeling joy when there's trouble around me or within me? And can we see that joy offers us a spaciousness to connect more fully with the suffering within and around us? Because when we can connect with that joy, it offers us, our mind and our heart, a sense of more balance, more equanimity, again, more wholeness, and more inspiration, right? To be able to turn towards instead of turn away from the things that are difficult. And again, James Baraz, you know, points out that joy is just an important part of our toolkit for keeping our hearts open. And I feel like so much of our practice is about that, right? Is learning how to keep our hearts open and learning where are the places that make us close our heart. And again, another lovely quote from Tagore to remember is that a lamp can only light another lamp when it continues to burn in its own flame. So if if that flame is joy, if we want to offer our goodness out towards the world to help as best we can, we have to tend that flame of goodness, right? We have to tend that flame of joy within ourselves. And it is, it's definitely a challenge. Psychologist Rick Hansen has this great saying that our brains are like Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. This kind of negativity bias, like we tend to hang on to the negative, and it's a survival evolutionary instinct. So I've read, negative experiences tend to stick because that's what kept us alive. Positive experiences, well, those are nice, but not as critical to survival. So they kind of can wash right through us. So we really have to make conscious efforts to retrain our brains to help develop joy and compassion and make those our default response, right? Rather than feeding the fear or the anger, that kind of thing. And I'll share, a few practices that I have tried and continue to work with. And first, I wanted to share this bit of writing from the wonderful Mary Oliver, just to see what it feels like, what she says here. It's called Don't Hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has a way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Right? Noticing it the instant when love begins, and it's not made to be a crumb. We don't have to settle for for joyful crumbs. we can dig right in. And some of the things that may help us with that practices. One is you can do this anytime, this one. Noticing and savoring things that bring that feeling of joy up. Maybe it's delight, maybe it's a peaceful joy, whatever the kind of joy it is that you might connect to, just noticing when it comes up and hanging out with it for a little while, savoring it. John Kabat-Zinn likes to say about sort of the difficult feelings, it's already here, let me feel it. Well, we can apply that same thing to joy, and these other feelings of goodness. You're already here, so let me feel it. And another aspect to consider is try to discover the spaces of being and receiving, because meditation teacher, Dharma teacher, Christina Feldman talks about how joy arises usually in spaces of being and spaces of receiving, when we're actually open to receiving it, when we're quiet enough and not, rushing or doing, that's usually when we can notice that joy is arising. So just discover what are those spaces for you. One that taps into the sympathetic joy is, first of all, rejoicing in your own good qualities. What about yourself brings you joy? Ooh, that's a juicy question. and rejoice in the happiness of others. When someone else is happy, can we really say, wow, that is so wonderful. May you have even more happiness, instead of, wow, I wish that I had that, And then Pema Chodron relates this practice to the practice of Tonglen, which very briefly is, sort of practicing breathing in the bad or the dark or the difficult, and breathing out the good, the light, the ease, And so with joy in particular, she says, well, when you feel joy, instead of clinging to it, because there's that tendency with joy, we feel it, we're like, oh, I love this, I would love to have it all the time, So when you feel joy, instead of clinging to it, try to give it away, send it out to others on your out breath, oh, this joy that I feel, may my neighbor feel this joy, may the grumpy person at the checkout line feel this joy, whoever, may the whole world feel this joy. to get us, out of that habit of, again, that clinging and aversion, right? To notice and give it away, because there's enough to go around. We don't have to worry about having a scarcity of it if we're really looking for this and practicing, right, with our joy. And so our meditation and mindfulness practice, our precious jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, our willingness to show up and learn to open rather than habitually resist. When we rejoice in these, we're better able to offer a steady, joyful mind and heart to our world that is in need of much tending. So live in joy and love, even among those who hate. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy, in peace, even among the troubled. Look within, be still, free from fear and attachment. Know the sweet joy of the way. And I welcome comments, questions, challenges.
Those of you online can feel free to unmute yourself. Those of you online, feel free to unmute yourself. I can pass the mic around here too. Anyone want to kick us off? Over here.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me? I want to thank you so much for this talk, partly because I myself have been having different waves of anxiety, but it wasn't brought on by the way. It's part of my life. And your exploration of the Buddhist way of dealing with it really is very meaningful in terms of what to do with practice later. But I have a quote and something that I do. My quote is, the great essayist Wendell Berry says, "Take joy even though you've considered all the facts." And considering the facts, I find it that's such an incredible, I think it rhymes with the Buddha in a way, although he's writing out of a deeply Christian tradition. And the other thing is, and I'll finish up, is I was actually lying in bed last night, woke up at 3 o'clock, anxious. And I was like, I can hardly wait to go meditate tomorrow. It'll be so nice. and it is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing both of those.
Thank you so much for your talk. Can you write down, or can we post the saying that you had from Buddha? Because that's just
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can post it on Circle for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, over here.
Thank you, Karleen. Your speech is so elegant and so inspiring, and I felt your joy, and I felt my heart open to you and to all those that are here. So the beauty of the ripple effect and sitting in joy and sharing whoever it lands on and however it lands is less important than just opening and allowing it to flow. So thank you as always. Truly touched my heart. Thank you, Karleen.
Thank you, Myogetsu.
Karleen, I feel that this just could not have been more timely. And I love what you had to say. And as I was listening, I was partly thinking, oh, I have to send this to, I have to tell so-and-so about this and so, because I just wanted other people to hear your words of wisdom and just experience what it is to listen to a talk by you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Hi, Karleen. I first wanted to just thank you so much. I really appreciated this beautiful and personal and well-constructed talk. And yeah, I appreciate just talking about the difficulty, and I relate to this idea of like, it's much easier for me to dwell in the suffering and having been a longtime skeptic of joy. And that ties into something about Ross Gay, who I really love. And my husband and I lived in Bloomington for quite a while, and that's where Ross Gay teaches. And he's very present in the community there. And I love his poetry, but I tend to be also sometimes a little bit skeptical about people's, they're like who they are as a person and who their work is and how those interconnect. But Ross Gay is a delightful, joyful person who would be riding his bike around town in these bright colors and going to the farmer's market and working in the orchard. And that even just his presence in Bloomington opened something up in me where I was like, oh, wow, he really is living this joyful, delightful, whatever it is, kind of philosophy. But he's also a real person. And you see him, getting coffee and being grumpy about something, but he's out there and open to people. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that reminds me too of something that I, was contemplating while preparing for this, is that when we think about the teachers or authors or what have you that kind of inspire us. I mean, I think of Thich Nhat Hanh. To have someone speak about suffering and make it sound like love and joy. I mean, he's kind of the epitome of that. And that quality of joyfulness, however, whether it's glittery or whether it's, very quiet, it seems to be present, in those folks who are still out there doing the work that needs to be done. So yeah, it's when you see the real deal like that, it's very inspiring.
I think it's I just want to kind of double down on that idea that a person who is experiencing joy, it's even among people who are not, or who are grumpy, or going through real trauma, they need that. They need to see that joy. That's something that we can't discount the importance of, too.
Absolutely, Eric. Thank you. Yeah.
Karleen, thank you so much for this, for your talk. And I'm just really happy to see you laughing about the event that you shared. That was really an intensive event. And I just really appreciate your sharing your working with it, your integration of it, because, I think it will be helpful for people who go through the same thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Oshi.
Karleen, hi, this is,
Hi, Earl.
thanks so much. I wanted to put my own spin on this because I'm a golf fan, so I I watch golf tournaments on TV, and at the end, there's a winner. And oftentimes they break down in such emotion. They're crying, uh, and it's very joyful. And it's one of the reasons why people go to golf because you can experience this joy, and it is very attractive. It's one of the reasons why people watch it. And even my wife, if she's in the room, will, say, "Oh, hey, show me the end of this again," This guy sinks this 70-foot putt and breaks down. you know. So anyway, thanks so much for your talk. It's really, really, really helpful.
Thanks, Earl. And my husband is a golfer, so I fully get what you're talking about. All right. Well, thank you all once again for sharing this time and space with me. That it brings me great delight and joy to be with all of you, and yeah, just to be able to delight in the Dharma together. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Those of us here in the room can delight in some snacks. Thank you, Karleen. Thank you, online side. Really good to see you all. What happened to the mouse?
It's